And so we have two other people here who are running. Tell us something about yourself and tell us why you should be, well, in case of the Assembly people, reelected.
Okay, so I'm sitting here with my partner running for Assembly, Assemblyman Thomas P. Giblin, and we should be reelected because we have an actual proven record of service. That we're not just talking about, what should happen. A good leader has to have three things: identify the issues, come up with the solutions, and then have the competency to execute it. And Assemblyman Giblin and I have put forth excellent legislation, and Assemblyman Giblin is a mentor of mine. Long before I even got to the Assembly to fill the seat of the great Lieutenant Governor Sheila Oliver, he was in the Assembly as well doing legislation for working people and families. But, most recently we just did $15 an hour minimum wage.
What, the $15 an hour minimum wage? That was legislation that both of you sponsored?
That was legislation which I was a prime sponsor of, and I was able to move it through and strategize with the help of Assemblyman Thomas P. Giblin, who I'm pretty sure was also on the legislation.
That's true.
All right, so I'm sure a lot of people who are working are going to appreciate that in terms of a $15 minimum wage. I'm a teacher, I work with kids, and they're always talking about what that minimum wage is and going to be. So they have both of you to thank for that.
Yes.
All right, cool. So are there other things that are really important to you that you will either want to talk about, things that you've done or things that you will do if you are reelected?
Assemblyman?
Well, first of all, I just want to introduce myself to the listeners. My name is Thomas P. Giblin. I was raised in Newark, New Jersey. I've spent my entire life here in Essex County. I've had the opportunity to serve in public service for a number of years in different capacities. I was an Essex County freeholder for 10 years. I was the Essex County surrogate for 4 years. And I'm now in my 14th year in the New Jersey General Assembly. My district includes Montclair, East Orange, and Clifton. It's a very diverse district. There's approximately 225,000 people in that district. Some of my key responsibilities as an assemblyman include I'm the chairman of the Regulated Professions Committee, which oversees just about any occupation in the state as far as rules and regulations and licensing. I'm a member of the Assembly Higher Education Committee as well as the Assembly Transportation Committee, which are all three of them collectively are very important committees as far as impacting the lives of people here in New Jersey, especially in the 34th Legislative District.
So, and that's great because you've been legislating for a long time, and so you're like, this is another election, this is another campaign. One thing someone said about you is that no matter what the event is, you are for Assemblyman Giblin, you were always there. It said
Always there.
That you're like you have been doing this for so many years, and you don't take things for granted. Is that something that you pride yourself in?
Well, it's basically your responsibility as a legislature, and I know Britinee Timberlake feels the same way. You got to go out and meet the people. My district, Essex County, the state, is very diverse, and you got to have your ear to the ground. Listen to senior citizens, listen to young people. You got to listen to people with families, and really try to get into what's on their mind. And constituent service is an important element of being a successful legislator or office holder, because people call you, have issues that are paramount to them, and they're looking for somebody to try to navigate them through that effort.
Now, what are some of these other issues? And of course, feel free to jump in and to also say things that you want to get out there, because again, like we tell every politician who comes on here, this is a forum for you. Yeah. But there's a lot of people that you listen to. You are legislators, or at least two of you are legislators. What are the things that you can talk about that you've either worked on that change people's lives, or that you will want to work on in the next terms?
So I'll answer that question. Like I mentioned, we did the $15 an hour minimum wage. We also got an independent investigation in the event that someone loses their life during interaction with law enforcement. And we know that that is so incredibly important for our people because, you know, Dr. King, who we all idolize, and if you don't, then that's a problem too. But he had three main missions for equal rights in voting, economic equality through the Poor People's Campaign, and to end police brutality. And getting that bill across the finish line was monumental, actually nationwide. And we were able to do that.
Why was it monumental nationwide?
Because it was monumental nationwide because many places have tried to do it. Not many places have been able to succeed. And we succeeded in getting a governor's signature and that a piece of legislation signed into law so that we know that the issues in our communities will be treated in a balanced way. And it was not anti-police officer. We support our police officers. Many of us, like me, have family members who are police officers. Right. But what it is saying to that mother whose child has unfortunately lost their life that there will be an independent investigation carried through and for someone not to have doubts about that process.
And you're saying that it will occur anytime someone dies in police custody or by the hands of the police? That's
correct, and it has to be transferred outside of the county in which it happened.
So, like, we're talking about, there's a recent incident that I just read about a police officer who's being indicted in Newark for shooting two people in a moving car. How would that case have been dealt with the legislation that's
that case has to currently be dealt with because the legislation did get passed by an independent investigation. So it has to go to the Attorney General's office and be handled independently from Essex County.
So is that what's going on now? Like, are the prosecutor who brought the charges, is that part of that law, or is there something else that's going to kick in?
No. It's all the law is in effect.
Okay.
And out of respect for people's family members and things, I won't comment on a pending case other than sending condolences, of course.
Okay.
But that is something that because we did that, now it's in effect, and that right there is something that is imperative to our people. So what I'm talking about doing is real things.
So when we're reading this in the news, the way that's being handled, it's being handled under current law that was passed just a few months ago.
This is correct.
Okay.
This is correct. And that right there is being for the people. If you're really for the people, you're going to fight for legislation that will address long-term societal issues that we've had. You can't just complain about things. You got to be able to know how to work together to get it done. And Assemblyman Giblin and I work so well together to get it done and to get it across the finish line. We can't just have people, with megaphones hollering and screaming about the issues without coming up with the solutions. Our community has waited too long. The other thing that we've been able to get done is restoration for the Housing Trust Fund. I heard some talk earlier about people being displaced and development and things. Well, the Housing Trust Fund is actually something that developers can pull from to include affordability in their projects. A lot of people don't really understand.
Can you explain that? Because I don't understand that.
Uh-huh.
So what does that mean?
That means that a lot of people don't realize that most people who make a family of four that makes under about $70,000 a year could qualify. And while development is happening all around us, and we want it, like look at Newark with the Whole Foods coming and how great that is, right? But we have to make sure that we're also preserving affordability. And the Housing Trust Fund has funds there so that when developers are building and they're building residential units, that a portion of them, they have the money to be able to offset the cost and create housing so that New Jerseyans can really afford to stay in New Jersey. This, again, is another monumental thing that we've been able to work on.
And this is a law that's been passed that already, right now, so if there's development going on in your community, there's a trust fund that developers can use to make that housing more affordable.
It's a state housing trust fund, and unfortunately, under the previous administration, Governor Chris Christie, there was no money for it, and we fought for restoration in the process. Part of this is also knowing and understanding the process. And knowing that...
You've emphasized that. You've said that twice.
Yeah. Well, I wonder why I said that twice.
Okay.
If you don't know the process, you can't help the people. And that's just the main thing. You have to know the process. And we've been able to do that and to navigate well. Some things that I'm currently working on include making sure that we're able to retain our community wealth through a community wealth preservation program. and try to cut down on the foreclosure crisis, which is really bleeding the wealth out of communities, and particularly communities of color.
So, and that last thing that you talked about, is that the trust fund, or you're talking about a different policy?
Completely different. What I'm
Okay,
telling
so this
you
is more
we're
legislation.
working.
So this is more legislation.
We're
so
working.
You just mentioned, okay, so you mentioned minimum wage, you mentioned the housing trust fund, and now you're mentioning.
And now I'm mentioning something that I have and we're working on. We're looking to pass that bill this year that will keep the wealth from being lost in our communities due to the foreclosure crisis. We know, especially as peoples of color, that our wealth is directly tied to our properties. And when our properties are foreclosed on and outside investors capture it, they're actually capturing our wealth. And this bill addresses that. So this is all for the people. And I do want to say, you mentioned, we're doing so much with legislation. I want to kind of just digress and address something that was said earlier, because I've only been there for a year, and I'm so grateful to Assemblyman Giblin for mentoring me, who's mentored me since I was an undergraduate at Seton Hall. In
So
that
you're
year
saying
time,
so you're saying that, like, Assemblyman Giblin, you made it clear that you've been in office for a very long time in different offices, and you're saying that there's been mentorship that's gone on. What is
Right.
So you could talk to us about that as you're making the other point as well.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, so that's right. I believe in mentorship, and I'm grateful for it, because when somebody is sharing their wisdom with you, you ought to listen. And this is a gentleman who has been doing this for a long time and has always been doing it for the people. He's a union leader and a union fighter, and we need to send him back. But so in that year time, I've only been there for a year, and I just told you about all these pieces of the legislation that we're working on for the community, right? But I also had the opportunity to give birth within that same time frame.
You told us you were a new mother as well.
That's right. And I want to address something that was mentioned about women and the Essex County Democratic Party. My Chairman Leroy Jones, who is the chairman of the Essex County Democratic Party.
You heard the shots fired.
I sure did, but shots fired back. Because let me tell you something. You don't get any more feminist than sending a young millennial woman down, 9 months pregnant, carrying a child, to be sworn into the New Jersey State Assembly. And for that, I need a bomb to drop or something on the radio, Come on, DJ. Because that's, what more do you want? What more do you want?
So
and by the way, always make sure that there's diverse representation. Juan Rivera here is sitting here as a Latino male. Diversity represented across the board. You see diversity in this very room. You have a Latino, you have an African American, and you have an Irish male. Like, this is diversity, and that we represent New Jersey.